The headline screamed its message: State announces reopening of historic Camp Blackwood. 3 months had passed since Captain Victor Dior finally found his way home to Cliff Harbor. Life on Cliff Island had settled into something wonderfully ordinary. Larry Bickerpoint still left for work before sunrise. Jenny had become famous for her blackberry pies. Miss Eleanor continued pretending she didn't know what Kids Corner was doing every Friday afternoon. Thomas Mercer still climbed the lighthouse stairs each evening, checking the old bronze bell before lighting the lamp, just in case. Kids Corner had changed too, not because they'd grown older, but because they'd grown together. Every Friday after school, the 7 friends met in their familiar cafeteria booth. The cedar archive box had grown noticeably heavier, now holding 2 labeled relics: a small brass raven from the Third Stall Mystery and a weathered ship's wheel from the ghost ship of Cliff Harbor. Capel gently closed the lid. He smiled, saying, "We're actually building a history." Maya added, "One mystery at a time." That's when Miss Eleanor approached, carrying 7 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. She placed an old newspaper on the table, its headline instantly catching everyone's attention. State announces reopening of historic Camp Blackwood. Summer program begins in 2 weeks. No one reached for their cocoa. No one spoke. Soren slowly looked up, a single word escaping his lips: "No." Ethan frowned. "What's wrong?" Soren didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at the photograph beneath the headline, a weathered wooden entrance sign between towering cedars, its faded letters newly restored. "Welcome to Camp Blackwood." Soren whispered, "That sign wasn't there yesterday." Everyone turned. "What do you mean?" "My grandfather," he swallowed. "He took me hiking there once. I was 6. There wasn't a camp. There wasn't even a road." Miss Eleanor quietly folded the newspaper. "There wasn't," she confirmed. Silence. Capel looked confused. "But the article says it's reopening." Just then, Thomas Mercer walked into the cafeteria. Without even sitting down, he answered, "It can't." Everyone looked toward the old lighthouse keeper. The state has tried reopening Camp Blackwood 4 different times. What happened? Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he removed an old leather wallet from his jacket. Inside rested a faded newspaper clipping dated May 14th, 1957. The headline read, "Summer Camp Abandoned After Children Disappear." Another clipping, "Reopening Delayed. Rangers Unable to Locate Main Camp." Another, "Search Crews Report Impossible Maps." And another, "Blackwood Project Cancelled Again. Trails Lead in Circles." Capel blinked. They couldn't find it. Thomas nodded. Even though they were standing inside it, Naomi slowly looked toward Miss Eleanor. "The forest key." Miss Eleanor quietly nodded. "It's waking." Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the trees surrounding Cliff BTC. Nothing unusual until every napkin on the outdoor tables suddenly lifted into the air. 7 napkins, exactly 7. They swirled together, not randomly, but purposefully, forming a rough circle above Kids Corner. Leaves joined them, pine needles, tiny cedar cones. The wind carried a single sentence, so soft that only the 7 children heard it: "Welcome back." The wind stopped. Every napkin drifted gently back onto the tables. Capel looked around. "You guys." Maya nodded. "I heard it. So did I." Everyone had. Even Ethan. That night, Capel couldn't sleep, again. Not because of nightmares, because the woods outside his bedroom window refused to be quiet. Normally, the trees behind Northgale Estate swayed gently. Owls called, crickets chirped, branches creaked. Tonight, the sounds were different. Every gust of wind sounded almost like words, too faint to understand, too deliberate to ignore. The silver pocket watch, the tide key, remained perfectly still. Bell Reef rested peacefully. For the first time since moving to Cliff, none of the old relics reacted. Instead, something new did. A tiny cedar cone rolled across Capple's windowsill. He frowned. His window was closed. The cone stopped beside the pocket watch. It slowly split open. Inside, instead of seeds, rested a tiny folded piece of bark. Capple carefully unfolded it. Burned into the wood were 3 words: "Don't follow voices." The bark immediately crumbled into dust. The next morning, Kids' Corner met before school at the harbor. Nobody had slept well. Priya admitted she'd heard children laughing outside her bedroom. Naomi said birds had gathered outside her window all night. Soren quietly confessed something worse. "I heard my mom." The others looked at him, calling me. Capple frowned. "Your mom passed away years ago." Soren nodded. "I know," I almost answered. A long silence followed. Miss Eleanor arrived carrying a canvas backpack older than any of them. Dark green, its leather straps cracked with age. Across the front, stitched in faded thread, were 2 words: Blackwood Staff. She carefully set it on the table. "I've never opened this." Thomas looked surprised. "You've had it for 30 years. Why not?" Miss Eleanor slowly met each child's eyes. Because it wasn't ready. She loosened the straps, lifted the flap. Inside, only one item rested: a beautifully carved wooden whistle made entirely from cedar. It looked simple, yet every child immediately recognized the small raven engraved into its side. Another relic, not a raven key, a guide, just like Victor's compass had once been. The whistle gave a single, soft note, untouched by anyone. Then it pointed. Not physically, instinctively. Every child felt the same pull, north, toward the mountains, toward endless cedar forests, toward Camp Blackwood. Miss Eleanor slowly closed the backpack. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. 3 mysteries have found you. Now, for the first time, you're about to walk into one. Far away, beneath a canopy so dense that daylight barely reached the forest floor, a tall figure stood motionless among ancient cedars. His long ranger's coat was woven with moss and bark. Antlers of twisted branches rose from his hood like a living crown. Amber eyes opened slowly. Leaves circled around him without wind. The Whisper King, Alden Blackwood, placed one weathered hand against the trunk of the oldest tree in the forest. Thousands of whispers rushed through the woods at once. He listened, then spoke only 4 quiet words: "They're finally coming home." The whisper followed them all day, not loudly, not constantly, just enough to make every member of Kids' Corner glance over their shoulder every few minutes. It never repeated the same words twice. Capple heard, "This way." Priya heard, "Don't be late." Naomi heard, "Take another picture." Ethan heard absolutely nothing, and somehow that frightened him the most. Friday afternoon couldn't arrive fast enough. School ended beneath gray skies, and the 7 friends met in their familiar booth. The cedar archive box rested in the middle of the table. Case 1, Case 2, now Case 3 waited to be written. Miss Eleanor arrived carrying a large county map. Thomas Mercer followed, carrying something wrapped in canvas. He carefully laid it on the table. It was another map, older, far older, yellowed, fragile, hand-drawn. The words across the top read, "Camp Blackwood Summer Wilderness Program 1912. Capple smiled. "So this is the original camp." Thomas frowned. "No." He pointed to the date. This was the expanded camp. Everyone looked confused. "What does that mean?" Thomas slowly pulled another map from the tube. Smaller, older, dated 1886. Again, Camp Blackwood, then another, again. Camp Blackwood, another, again. Camp Blackwood, that. Miss Eleanor quietly said, "The camp keeps getting older." Silence filled the booth. Ethan laughed nervously. "That's impossible." Miss Eleanor nodded. "It should be." She spread every map across the table. Each one showed the camp in a different place. Cabins moved, the lake changed shape, trails disappeared, buildings appeared, entire hills shifted. Nothing matched, except one thing. Every map showed the exact same cedar tree, always in the center, always untouched, always marked with the same symbol, a raven. Capel leaned closer. The tree never moves. No, Thomas answered quietly. Everything else does. Naomi slowly looked up. The forest is rearranging itself. Miss Eleanor smiled. You're beginning to think like keepers. Capel immediately corrected her. We're not keepers. Miss Eleanor's expression softened. No, not yet. Outside, rain began falling softly, the kind that barely disturbed puddles, the kind hikers loved, the kind that made forests smell alive. Soren suddenly stood. Everyone turned toward him. He wasn't looking at the maps. He was staring through the cafeteria window toward the distant mountains. His face had gone pale. I know that trail. What trail? He pointed. Far beyond town, a faint opening through the trees had appeared on the mountainside, impossible to notice unless someone knew exactly where to look. I've never seen it before, he whispered, but I know exactly where it goes. Nobody questioned him. After Bell Reef, they had learned to trust instincts that made no sense. An hour later, Thomas's old Jeep climbed a narrow logging road into the mountains. The farther they drove, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, no distant river, only tires crunching gravel. Eventually the road ended. Thomas shut off the engine. Silence, real silence, the kind found only in places untouched by cities. Miss Eleanor stepped out first. The air smelled different here. Fresh cedar, wet moss, earth, and something else, something old, almost sweet, like forgotten books. Before them stood an enormous weathered sign exactly like the newspaper photograph. Only this one looked ancient. The paint had cracked. Moss covered half the letters. The wood itself had begun growing into the surrounding trees, as though the forest refused to let it leave. Welcome to Camp Blackwood, where every child leaves stronger. Priya frowned. The newspaper picture looked brand new. It did, Miss Eleanor quietly agreed. So why? She reached out, touched the sign, fresh paint rubbed off onto her fingertips. She looked down, then back up. The sign had become weathered again, as though the forest had corrected itself. Capel whispered, "It doesn't want to be remembered wrong." The cedar whistle inside Miss Eleanor's backpack suddenly sang. One clear note, not loud, beautiful. Immediately the trees answered, not with echoes, with whispers. Thousands of them, children laughing, counselors calling names, campfire songs, footsteps, splashing water. For one brief moment, the empty forest sounded like the happiest summer camp in America. Then everything stopped. The camp entrance stood empty once again. Naomi slowly lifted her camera. Click! The flash illuminated the trail. When she lowered the camera, something stood 50 yards away, watching them. A boy, perhaps 12 years old, old-fashioned scout uniform, wide-brimmed campaign hat, neckerchief, bare feet. He wasn't transparent, he looked completely real. Capel waved. "Hey!" The boy didn't respond. He simply raised one finger, pointed deeper into the forest, then quietly mouthed two words. Wrong trail. He disappeared. Not faded. Gone. The lost scout, Soren whispered. Thomas slowly nodded. "I've heard stories." Miss Eleanor looked surprised. "You've seen him?" "No," Thomas answered, "but my grandfather did." He reached into his coat, removing a brittle photograph. The same boy, standing beside 20 other campers, everyone smiling. The back of the photograph read, "Camp Blackwood, Summer, 1934. One face had been circled in pencil. The scout. Below it, someone had written, "Daniel Ashcroft, missing August 17th, 1934. Never found." The children stared silently. Priya quietly whispered, "He wasn't trying to scare us." Capel nodded. He was warning us. Just then, a low breeze swept through the towering cedars. The branches moved together, not randomly, rhythmically, like thousands of voices speaking the same sentence. The 7 children listened carefully. This time, every one of them heard exactly the same words. The forest remembers. Follow the truth, not the voices. Maya looked at the others. We're being given directions. No, a calm voice answered from somewhere beyond the trees. Everyone turned. Standing between 2 massive cedars was an impossibly tall ranger. His coat appeared woven from bark, moss, and ivy. Twisted antlers crowned his hood. Amber eyes glowed softly beneath its shadow. Leaves circled around him despite the still air. He rested one weathered hand upon an ancient walking staff grown from cedar roots. Birds perched fearlessly upon his shoulders. He looked neither angry nor welcoming, simply ancient, the Whisper King, Alden Blackwood. He regarded the children for a long moment before speaking. His voice sounded like wind passing through 10,000 leaves, soft, gentle, impossible to ignore. No, he tilted his head slightly. The forest is trying to remember whether it can still trust children. No one moved. No one reached for a weapon. Because unlike the Hollow One, unlike Captain Vic, the Whisper King did not feel like a monster. He felt like the forest itself had decided to stand up and speak. Then his glowing amber eyes settled on Capel, and for the first time in over a century, Alden Blackwood smiled. You carry 2 memories, but only one belongs to you. The wind stopped. The whispers ceased. And somewhere deeper within Camp Blackwood, a rusty camp whistle blew. Not once, not twice, but 3 long blasts. The universal signal every camper knows. All campers report to the center of camp immediately. Except Camp Blackwood had been abandoned for nearly 100 years. The whistle echoed through the trees. 3 long blasts. The sound faded into the forest, yet somehow seemed to come from every direction at once. No birds flew, no wind stirred. Even the rain had stopped. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Ethan whispered, "Did anyone else hear that?" 7 heads nodded. Even Thomas Mercer looked uneasy. "I haven't heard a camp whistle in nearly 40 years. Miss Eleanor quietly added, "And that one hasn't been blown in over a century." The Whisper King remained perfectly still. His amber eyes never left the children. Then he slowly raised one hand, not to threaten them, but to stop them. "Do not answer the whistle." His voice flowed like leaves brushing together. "It doesn't know you're alive." Capel frowned. "What does that mean?" Alden looked toward the deeper forest. "It believes camp is still in session." No one understood. Then another whistle. 1 blast. Short, sharp, immediately followed by distant laughter. Children, hundreds of them, running, playing, calling one another's names. The sounds drifted through the cedars as if a bustling summer camp had suddenly awakened. Yet every trail remained empty. Priya slowly turned in a circle. "I can hear them, but I can't see anyone." Naomi instinctively raised her camera. Click. She looked at the screen, then froze. The others crowded around. The trail behind them was gone. Instead of the gravel path leading back to Thomas's Jeep, the photograph showed rows of freshly painted cabins, children running between them, counselors waving, campfires burning, laundry fluttering on clotheslines. The image looked as though it had been taken in 1938. Naomi lowered the camera. Reality returned. Only trees. She raised it again. Click. The camp appeared once more, perfectly clear. Capel reached for the camera. "It remembers." Miss Eleanor nodded. "The forest stores memories. The camera isn't taking photographs, it's borrowing them." Alden watched quietly. "You've begun to understand." Soren stepped forward. "If you're trying to protect the forest, why are you warning us?" For the first time, sadness crossed the Whisper King's face. "I was chosen to protect children." He looked down at his weathered hands. Then I forgot the difference between protecting children and keeping them. Silence settled over the clearing. Capel realized something. You've been alone. Alden didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ancient sorrow in his eyes answered for him. Suddenly, a small pine cone struck Ethan's backpack. Then another. Then another. Tiny cedar cones began falling all around them, not from the trees, from the air itself. Each one landed pointing in the same direction, toward the center of Camp Blackwood. The Whisper King immediately became tense. "No," he whispered. "It found you. What found us?" No answer. Instead, Alden slammed his cedar staff against the earth. The forest instantly changed. Roots rose from the ground. Branches bent low. Bushes shifted. An entire wall of cedar trees slowly grew across the trail behind the children. Not quickly, not violently, purposefully, as though the forest itself had closed a door. Thomas stepped back in amazement. "The woods, they obey you." Alden shook his head. "No, they remember me." The cedar whistle inside Miss Eleanor's backpack suddenly shrieked, not the gentle note from before. This sound was frantic, urgent, afraid. Then every tree in the forest whispered at once, not thousands of different voices. One sentence, 7 words, spoken by hundreds of unseen children. "Don't let him ring the dinner bell." The words echoed away. Silence returned. Capel looked at Maya. "Who?" Before anyone could answer, a rusted iron bell rang somewhere deep within the woods. 1, 2, 3, slow, heavy, ancient, the kind of bell every camper recognizes. Dinner, except this camp hadn't served dinner in generations. The moment the third bell rang, the forest transformed. Mist rolled between the trees. Cabins slowly emerged where moments earlier there had only been wilderness. Wooden bridges stretched across streams that hadn't existed seconds before. A flagpole rose above the clearing. A mess hall appeared. Smoke drifted lazily from its chimney. Rows of canoes rested beside a crystal-clear lake. Children laughed somewhere just out of sight. It was beautiful, warm, inviting, alive. Capel blinked. "It looks real." Miss Eleanor answered quietly. It was. Then the camp loudspeaker crackled to life. Its voice was distorted with age, almost cheerful. "Good evening, campers." Static. "Please report to the dining hall." More static. "Attendance is mandatory." Then came one final sentence, so quietly, only the 7 members of Kids Corner heard it. "No one is allowed to leave camp." The Whisper King closed his eyes, almost as if he'd feared this moment for decades. When he opened them again, the amber glow had become brighter, more determined. He looked directly at the 7 children. "Stay together. Do not answer anyone who calls your name." He hesitated. For the first time since they had met him, he sounded frightened. "Unless you can see their face." Then, without another word, Alden Blackwood stepped into the mist. The forest opened to let him pass, and just as quickly closed behind him. The 7 friends were left standing alone at the entrance to a camp that had not existed for nearly 100 years. Above the gate, a weathered wooden motto slowly became visible beneath layers of moss. "Welcome to Camp Blackwood, where every child finds their way home." As the last bit of moss fell away, one more line appeared underneath, a line that none of them had seen before. It looked as though it had just been carved, if the forest allows it. The gate creaked open by itself, not quickly, not dramatically, slowly, as though Camp Blackwood had been expecting them. No one moved. The 7 children stood shoulder to shoulder while Thomas Mercer and Miss Eleanor exchanged uneasy glances. "This isn't right," Thomas muttered. "It isn't," Miss Eleanor agreed, "but it's happening." Capel looked toward Maya. "What do we do?" Maya took a slow breath. She looked at each member of Kids Corner: Ethan, Naomi, Priya, Isaiah, Soren. Then Capel. "We made a promise." Everyone nodded. Together, they quietly recited the oath that had become the heart of their club. We don't chase monsters, we protect people. We don't seek fame, we seek truth. No mystery is solved until everyone gets home. The forest fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then the ancient gate swung completely open. Alden Blackwood slowly nodded from somewhere inside the trees. The forest has accepted your promise. The children stepped through together. Immediately, the temperature changed. The air became warmer. Golden sunlight streamed through towering cedars. Birds sang. The smell of fresh bread drifted from somewhere ahead. Capel blinked. Didn't it just stop raining? Thomas looked back toward the entrance. Beyond the gate, rain still poured over the mountain road. Inside the camp, it was a perfect summer afternoon. It's remembering, Miss Eleanor whispered. We're walking inside a memory. The trail widened into a bustling camp. Children raced past carrying fishing poles. Counselors laughed as they organized canoe races. A baseball game echoed from a nearby field. Someone played guitar beside the mess hall. Everything looked normal, happy, alive. Except no one acknowledged the newcomers. A little girl ran directly through Isaiah. He gasped. She never noticed. A boy carrying firewood walked straight through Thomas. Leaves swirled around him. The campers weren't ghosts. They were echoes, memories repeating themselves. Naomi quietly lifted her camera. Click. The image developed differently this time. Instead of a photograph, words slowly appeared across the bottom. Memory 4000-9118, July 18th, 1938. Camp attendance 112. She swallowed. My camera is numbering them. Miss Eleanor's eyes widened. The forest has been keeping records. Suddenly, a whistle shrilled across the camp. Every child froze. Every counselor stopped smiling. Every conversation ended instantly. The entire camp turned toward the flagpole, perfectly synchronized, like clockwork. An older man stepped onto the wooden platform. He wore a crisp ranger uniform. His silver whistle hung neatly around his neck. A warm smile, the kind every child trusts. Good afternoon, campers. 100 children answered together. Good afternoon, director. Capel frowned. That's not Alden. Thomas slowly shook his head. No, it isn't. The director continued smiling. Today's lesson is staying together. His eyes slowly swept across the campers, then stopped, directly on Kid's corner. His smile never faded, but something behind it changed. Recognition. You have visitors. The entire camp turned. 112 children, every face now staring at the 7 friends. No one blinked. No one smiled. No one spoke. Then every camper asked the exact same question in perfect unison. Why are they still alive? Capel felt a chill run down his spine. Maya instinctively stepped in front of the group. The campers remained perfectly still, watching, waiting. Alden Blackwood suddenly appeared between the children and the campers. He planted his cedar staff firmly into the earth. The ground answered. Roots rose like a living wall. The campers blinked, then smiled again, as if nothing had happened. The baseball game resumed. Children laughed. The guitar music returned. Within seconds, everything looked perfectly normal once more. Capel stared at Alden. What just happened? The Whisper King's expression was grave. That wasn't the camp. What do you mean? It was. He searched for the right word. A habit. Miss Eleanor looked confused. A habit. The forest remembers everything. Alden rested one hand on the nearest cedar. The happy days, the sad days, the storms, the songs, the promises, the betrayals. He looked back toward the children, but memories repeated often enough become habits. Soren quietly whispered, so the camp keeps repeating itself. Alden nodded. Every sunrise, every campfire, every meal, every bedtime. It has repeated the same summer for 92 years. Silence. Capel did the math. 92 years, but the camp only operated for a few decades. Alden looked away. It only needed one terrible afternoon. No one asked what happened, not yet. The cedar whistle hanging from Miss Eleanor's backpack suddenly floated into the air. No one touched it. It spun slowly, pointing deeper into the woods, toward the oldest part of camp, a place where no laughter echoed, where no cabins stood, only towering ancient cedars. Alden's face hardened. No. For the first time, his voice carried fear. You cannot go there. Maya met his eyes. Why? The Whisper King answered with a sentence that made every member of Kids Corner's heart sink, because that is where the forest stopped remembering and started forgetting. At that exact moment, a child laughed from somewhere behind them, a familiar laugh. Capel froze. He turned slowly. Standing near cabin 7 was his younger self, 8 years old, smiling, waving. Capel, the little boy called happily, "Come play." Capel's face went white. That's me." The younger Capel smiled wider. "Mom and Dad are waiting." Another voice drifted through the trees, warm, comforting. Larry's voice. "Capel." Then Jenny's. "Hurry, sweetheart." Capel instinctively took one step forward, then another. Maya grabbed his arm. "Capel." He stopped. The cedar bark warning that had crumbled in his bedroom flashed through his mind. Don't follow voices. He looked back toward the cabin. His younger self was still smiling, still waiting. Then the little boy's smile slowly stretched just a little too wide. His eyes never blinked, and his shadow did not belong to a child. Capel couldn't breathe. The little boy standing outside cabin 7 smiled exactly the way he used to smile in old family photographs. His blue jacket, the scuffed tennis shoes he'd loved when he was 8, even the tiny scar beneath his chin from falling off his bicycle. It was him. Exactly. Larry stood on the porch. Jenny waved from behind him. The smell of pancakes drifted from inside the cabin. Home. Everything about it felt perfect. Capel. Larry smiled warmly. "Come on, buddy. We've been waiting." Capel felt his feet moving before he realized it. One step, then another. Capel. Maya grabbed his backpack. He stumbled backward. The vision flickered. For just a heartbeat, Larry's smile never changed, but his eyes became completely black. Then everything returned to normal. Capel's heart pounded. "You saw that." Naomi nodded. "We all did." The little boy tilted his head, confused, almost disappointed. Then the cabin vanished, not slowly, instantly. The clearing became nothing more than moss and cedar trees. There had never been a cabin. No one spoke. Finally, Alden Blackwood broke the silence. "It learns." What learns? The camp. Isaiah frowned. "I thought you said the camp wasn't alive." "It isn't," Alden answered, "but memories are." He rested one hand on the trunk of a towering cedar. When enough memories gather in one place, they begin choosing. They choose what to remember. They choose what to forget. And eventually, they choose what they wish had happened. Miss Eleanor quietly finished his thought. "They begin creating new memories." Alden nodded. "False ones." Thomas Mercer looked toward the empty clearing. So none of that was real. Alden surprised everyone. Oh, it was real. He looked directly at Capel. "It simply wasn't yours." Capel stared. "What does that mean?" The Whisper King slowly pointed toward the ancient forest surrounding them. Every child who ever came to Camp Blackwood left something behind, a dream, a fear, a regret, a wish. The forest remembers them all. It showed you someone else's wish. Silence. Naomi quietly whispered, "So somewhere there really was a little boy who wished his parents would come back." Alden closed his eyes. Yes, and the forest remembered. The 7 friends stood motionless. The realization settled over them like fog. This place wasn't haunted by monsters. It was haunted by unfinished hopes. Suddenly, a twig snapped. Everyone turned. The lost scout stood only 20 feet away. Daniel Ashcroft, still 12 years old, still wearing his faded scout uniform, still barefoot. This time, he didn't disappear. He looked directly at Capel. then toward cabin 7, or rather where cabin 7 had appeared. He slowly shook his head. No. Then he knelt. Using one finger, he drew something into the dirt, 7 circles connected together. In the center, one enormous tree. Around the outside, 7 cabins, each cabin connected by a winding trail. Priya looked closer. He's drawing the camp. Daniel nodded. Then he crossed out cabin 7, hard, again, until the dirt was torn apart. He looked up. His voice was barely louder than the wind. The 7th cabin was never built. The children exchanged confused glances. Thomas immediately unfolded the old camp map. Every cabin was clearly marked. Cabin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Everyone stared. There was no cabin 7. Capel frowned. But we just saw it. Daniel nodded sadly. You saw what the forest wanted. Before anyone could ask another question, Daniel suddenly looked terrified, not at the children, behind them. His eyes widened. He took one hurried step backward, then another. He whispered only 3 words. He's ringing it. The boy vanished. At that exact instant, a deep bronze bell echoed through the woods. Not the dinner bell, not the camp whistle. This sound was older, lower, heavy enough to vibrate through the ground itself. One long ring. Alden's face drained of color. No. The Whisper King slammed his cedar staff into the earth. Roots exploded upward. Trees bent inward. Branches twisted together overhead. The entire forest reacted, as though trying to shield the children. What is that? Maya shouted. Alden answered without looking away from the deeper woods. The assembly bell. What does it do? His voice had become almost a whisper. It gathers everything the forest remembers. The second bell rang. Far away, children began singing, not happily, not sadly, perfectly. 100 voices, all in unison, an old camp song no one recognized. The melody floated through the trees like a lullaby, beautiful, mesmerizing. Wrong. Miss Eleanor slowly covered her ears. Don't listen. Why? Because her voice trembled. Once you know the words, the forest remembers your voice too. The third bell began to ring, slowly, deliberately. The song grew louder. Every tree around them seemed to hum with it. Even the ground vibrated. Then from somewhere beyond the oldest cedars, a single lantern appeared. Old brass, warm golden light. Swinging gently in the darkness, someone was carrying it, but no figure could yet be seen, only the light, moving silently toward them. Alden Blackwood did something none of them expected. The ancient guardian, the being who had stood watch over Camp Blackwood for more than a century, slowly removed his moss-covered ranger hat and bowed his head, not in respect, in sorrow. He spoke so quietly that only the 7 children heard him. He's awake. The lantern stopped, just beyond the tree line. A calm, unfamiliar voice drifted through the forest, not angry, not threatening, simply welcoming. Campers, a pause. Then a smile could somehow be heard in the voice. You're late for evening assembly. The lantern remained motionless among the cedars. Its warm golden light pushed gently against the darkness. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, just the lantern, waiting. The calm voice spoke again. Evening assembly begins in 5 minutes. The words were kind, patient, the sort of voice every child instinctively trusted, and that frightened Alden Blackwood more than anything the 7 children had yet seen. The Whisper King planted his cedar staff firmly into the earth. No one answers him. His voice carried none of its usual calm. If he asks your name, remain silent. If he tells you he knows your parents, remain silent. If he promises to help you, remain silent. Capel looked at him. You sound afraid. Alden met his eyes. I am. The lantern drifted forward. Now the figure carrying it became visible. He wore an immaculate forest green camp director's uniform, polished boots, pressed trousers, a silver whistle hung neatly around his neck, a brass compass rested on a leather cord over his heart. His gray hair was perfectly combed. His smile was warm, comforting, safe. He looked like every beloved camp director from every summer camp brochure ever printed. He removed his hat. "Good evening." He bowed politely. "My name is Benjamin Hawthorne, director of Camp Blackwood. It is a pleasure to finally meet you." No one answered. Benjamin smiled a little wider. "Excellent. Alden taught you your first rule." He nodded approvingly toward the Whisper King. "He always was an exceptional counselor." Capel blinked. "Counselor?" Benjamin chuckled. "Oh yes, he was my finest counselor. He protected every child who ever came here. He still does." The 7 children slowly looked toward Alden. The Whisper King lowered his eyes. It was true. Benjamin continued walking toward them. Not a single twig snapped beneath his boots. The forest itself seemed to make room for him. Flowers bloomed where he stepped. Birds landed nearby. Nothing feared him. Alden. Benjamin smiled kindly. "You've done remarkable work." But he glanced toward Kid's Corner. "You frightened our guests." "They're not guests," Alden replied quietly. "They're investigators." Benjamin laughed softly. "Children shouldn't investigate. They should play. They should learn. They should sing around campfires. They should make memories." His expression softened. "And they should never have to leave." Silence. Capel felt something about those words was terribly wrong, not because of what Benjamin said, because of how much he wanted to believe him. Maya suddenly spoke. "If you're the director, why has everyone been disappearing?" Benjamin looked genuinely confused. "Disappearing?" He looked around the camp. "I don't see anyone missing." Thomas Mercer stepped forward. "The camp closed almost a century ago." Benjamin smiled. "No, it never closed. The state says the state forgot." Benjamin answered gently. "The newspapers forgot, the maps forgot, the world forgot." His smile never faded, but Camp Blackwood remembers every child. Miss Eleanor suddenly whispered, "Oh," she finally understood. Capel looked at her. "What?" She stared at Benjamin. "You aren't haunting the camp, you're preserving it." Benjamin inclined his head. "Exactly. The camp was built to create happy memories. When the forest key awakened, it granted the camp one final gift. It allowed every perfect summer to continue forever." The 7 friends stood speechless. Isaiah frowned. "But people disappeared." Benjamin looked genuinely saddened. "They didn't disappear, they stayed." No one breathed. Benjamin spread his arms toward the beautiful camp. Why would anyone choose to leave the happiest place they ever knew? At that moment, a baseball rolled gently across the grass, stopping at Capel's feet. A little boy ran over, about 9 years old, freckles, red cap, huge smile. "Can you throw it back?" Capel picked up the ball. It felt real, heavy, worn. He tossed it. The boy caught it. "Thanks." Then he ran away laughing. Naomi slowly raised her camera. Click. She stared at the screen, then quietly handed it to Maya, printed across the bottom, "Memory 12,441. Camper, Joshua Miller. Age, 9. Missing since July 22nd, 1948. The baseball still bounced across the field. Joshua was still laughing, still playing, completely unaware that nearly 80 years had passed. Capel whispered, "He doesn't know." Benjamin looked toward the baseball game with unmistakable affection. "No, he never has to." For the first time, the children understood. Benjamin Hawthorne wasn't trapping children because he hated them. He truly believed he was protecting them, saving them from grief, from growing older, from losing the happiest days of their lives. Alden finally spoke. "You promised them one summer. You stole their futures." Benjamin's smile faded for the first time. "I gave them forever." The forest instantly became silent. No birds, no wind, no whispers, Benjamin turned slowly toward the Whisper King. Alden, you've spent 100 years fighting to wake them. And for what? So they can remember pain? So they can remember death? So they can remember being forgotten? Alden gripped his cedar staff. So they can remember living. Neither man raised his voice. Neither moved, yet the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Then every cedar tree surrounding the camp began whispering, not to the children, to Alden. Thousands of voices, thousands of memories, thousands of children. The Whisper King closed his eyes, listening. When he opened them again, a single tear traced a path through the moss upon his weathered face. He looked at Benjamin, then at Kid's corner. Finally, he spoke the words that would change everything. The forest has chosen. Benjamin smiled. I knew it would. Alden slowly shook his head. Not you. He turned toward the 7 children. His amber eyes glowed brighter than ever before. It has chosen them. The ground trembled. Deep beneath the roots of the oldest cedar, something ancient stirred. The great tree in the center of Camp Blackwood began to glow from within, its bark threaded with veins of golden light. Hidden inside its trunk, something answered, not a voice, not a whisper, a heartbeat. Slow, powerful, ancient, the forest key had awakened. No one spoke. The heartbeat echoed beneath the roots, slow, steady, ancient. It wasn't loud, it was felt more than heard. Every pulse traveled through the earth, up the trunks of the towering cedars, and into the soles of the children's shoes. The entire forest had a heartbeat. Capel looked down. I can feel it. So can I, Priya whispered. One by one, the others nodded. Even Thomas Mercer placed a hand against the ground. I've been hiking these woods for 40 years. I've never felt this. The enormous cedar at the center of camp began glowing brighter. Its bark shimmered with thousands of tiny golden lines. They weren't cracks, they were memories. Every line represented a life. Every knot represented a story. Every branch held decades of laughter, tears, promises, and goodbyes. The oldest tree in Camp Blackwood wasn't simply alive. It was remembering. Benjamin Hawthorne smiled. There you are. His voice carried genuine affection. I was beginning to think you'd never wake. He took one slow step toward the tree. Immediately, every branch above him bent away, not violently, deliberately, rejecting him. Benjamin stopped. His smile faded. So, you still remember? Alden Blackwood quietly answered, It remembers everything. The Whisper King approached the cedar with reverence. He removed his ranger's hat, placed one weathered hand upon the ancient bark. The whispers returned. Thousands, perhaps millions. Children laughing, parents crying, counselors singing, footsteps, campfires, rain, birthdays, farewells, every memory ever carried into Camp Blackwood. The tree wasn't whispering, it was listening. Naomi lifted her camera. Click. The screen flickered. Instead of a photograph, words slowly appeared. The first keeper, Alden Blackwood. Entrusted, June 3rd, 1912. Status, faithful. Naomi looked up in astonishment. It knows you. Alden smiled sadly. No, it remembers me. Capel stepped closer. If you're the keeper, then where's the forest key? The Whisper King looked at the ancient cedar, then back at the children. His answer surprised everyone. There isn't one. Silence. Benjamin chuckled softly, still protecting it. Alden shook his head. There was once, but the forest changed. The key became part of the tree. The tree became part of the forest, and the forest became part of every memory left here. Miss Eleanor's eyes widened. Just like Bell Reef. Thomas looked at her. The tide key, it disappeared. No. She smiled. It matured. The children slowly realized something extraordinary. The Raven keys were never meant to remain objects. Each one eventually became part of the place it protected. The hollow one had protected Northgale. The tide key had become Bell Reef. Now the forest key had become the oldest cedar itself. Isaiah looked toward Benjamin. "So why are you trying to wake it?" Benjamin's expression remained calm. "I'm not. I'm trying to ask it one question." "What question?" Benjamin looked up into the endless canopy. His voice was almost hopeful. "May summer continue?" Silence filled the forest. Then the cedar answered, not with words. Its branches slowly shook. One cedar cone fell, then another, then 7. Exactly 7. Each landed gently at the feet of one member of Kids' Corner. Capel picked his up. It was warm, almost alive. As he turned it over in his hands, it slowly opened. Inside, not seeds. A tiny carved wooden raven, no larger than his thumb, beautifully detailed. Its wings spread wide. The others gasped. Each cedar cone contained one. 7 ravens, each unique, no two alike. Miss Eleanor whispered, "The forest has given you its trust." Benjamin stared silently at the tiny carvings, his shoulders lowered. "I was afraid of that." The little ravens suddenly glowed. Soft amber light spread across their carved wings. One by one they flew, not physically, spiritually. Tiny golden birds circled each child once before dissolving into shimmering dust. The glowing dust settled gently against each child's chest, then disappeared. Capel blinked. What just happened? Alden looked genuinely astonished. "I've never seen that before." The heartbeat beneath the earth became stronger. The great cedar's bark slowly opened, not splitting, unfolding, like petals. Inside, golden light poured outward. At the center, suspended within the living tree, was something impossible. Not a key, not a relic, a small sapling, only 3 feet tall, growing inside the heart of the ancient cedar. Its leaves shimmered like polished emerald glass. Every leaf contained moving images, tiny memories, children fishing, families hugging, campfires, snowfall, birthdays, graduations, lives. Capel whispered, "It's beautiful." Benjamin looked at it with tears in his eyes. "I planted that tree." No one moved. When I opened Camp Blackwood, Benjamin continued quietly, "I planted one cedar. I wanted every child to remember this place." He smiled faintly. "I never imagined the tree would remember them instead." For the first time, neither Alden nor Benjamin spoke as guardian and adversary. They simply stood together. 2 old friends, remembering. Then a deep crack echoed through the woods. Not from the cedar, from somewhere beneath it. The ground trembled. Birds exploded from the canopy. The whispers stopped instantly. Every leaf on every tree became perfectly still. Alden's expression changed. Not fear, recognition. He looked into the darkness beneath the roots, then slowly spoke 5 words. Something else heard the heartbeat. Benjamin's calm smile vanished. He took 1 step backward. For the first time since meeting him, the camp director looked afraid. Very quietly, he whispered, "It was never supposed to wake." From deep beneath the oldest cedar, a second heartbeat answered, slower, heavier, not belonging to the forest. The second heartbeat echoed through the earth. Thump, long, slow, heavy. Unlike the heartbeat of the great cedar, which felt warm and comforting, this one felt ancient, patient, watching. The ground beneath the 7 children vibrated gently. Tiny ripples spread across puddles. The oldest trees groaned, not from wind, from recognition. Alden Blackwood closed his eyes. I prayed I would never hear that sound again. Benjamin Hawthorne slowly removed his camp hat. For the first time, the camp director looked old, very old. His shoulders sagged. His confident smile disappeared. Thomas Mercer looked between them. "You both know what this is." Neither answered. Instead, Miss Eleanor did. She stared at the roots beneath the great cedar. Her voice barely escaped her lips. "The first keeper." Capel frowned. I thought Alden was the first keeper. Alden slowly shook his head. No, I was the first keeper of Camp Blackwood, but someone guarded this place long before there was a camp. The heartbeat came again. Thump. The entire forest answered. Every cedar bowed. Every fern lowered. Even the birds became silent, not out of fear, out of respect. Naomi quietly lifted her camera. Click. Instead of a photograph, the screen remained black. Letters slowly appeared. Excess denied. Memory predates the forest. Naomi stared. It can't read it. Miss Eleanor nodded. Because the forest wasn't here yet. Silence. The trees, Capel whispered, weren't always here. Benjamin answered, no, there was once only stone and wind and one hill. Alden quietly continued, then someone planted the first cedar. The children looked toward the great cedar. For the first time they realized something astonishing. It wasn't naturally growing, it stood in the exact center of a perfect circle. Every other tree had grown around it, as if the entire forest had expanded from this single point. Isaiah slowly spoke. So the whole forest grew from one tree? Alden nodded. One seed. The great cedar suddenly glowed brighter. Its golden veins spread into the earth like rivers of light. The children watched in amazement as those glowing roots stretched beneath every trail, every cabin, every lake, every hill. The forest wasn't connected. It was one living thing. Suddenly, one root cracked. A loud splinter echoed beneath the ground. The heartbeat stopped. Everything became still. Then a single root slowly rose from the earth. It twisted upward like an enormous wooden hand. At its tip, something rested, not a relic, not a weapon, an old leather journal, bound with cedar bark, untouched by time. The journal gently landed at Maya's feet. No one moved. Benjamin whispered, "It chose." Maya carefully knelt. The cover was worn smooth, embossed into the leather a single raven. Beneath it, 4 words. The first gardener. Capel frowned. Gardener? Miss Eleanor's eyes widened. Not keeper. Alden nodded slowly. The keepers came later. The gardeners came first. The gardeners planted the 13 sacred places. They didn't rule them. They cared for them. When their work was finished, they disappeared. Benjamin quietly corrected him. No, they didn't disappear. They became the roots. A cold breeze drifted through the clearing. The great cedar shivered. Thousands of whispers returned, not frightened, not warning, almost joyful. Maya carefully opened the journal. The pages were blank, every one. She flipped through dozens of pages. Nothing. Then a single drop of rain landed on the paper. Golden ink spread across the page by itself. Words slowly formed, beautiful handwriting, older than anyone could imagine. To whoever opens this book, if you are reading these words, then the forest has remembered you. The 7 children stood frozen. Another line slowly appeared. There are 13 gardens, 13 keepers, 13 raven keys, but only. The ink hesitated, as though the journal itself feared finishing the sentence. Finally, the last words appeared. 1 root. The second heartbeat exploded beneath the earth. Thump. The clearing shook violently. The great cedar groaned. A long crack split the ground beside its roots. Not deep, just enough. Something enormous moved beneath the earth. Not upward. Sideways, as if circling them. Capel instinctively stepped back. What was that? Alden answered without taking his eyes off the widening crack. The root is waking. Benjamin whispered something under his breath. A prayer. The first anyone had heard him pray. The crack widened another inch. Darkness filled the opening, not ordinary darkness, the kind that seemed to absorb light itself. Then, from somewhere deep below, a child's voice drifted upward, soft, lonely, barely audible. "Has anyone come to take me home?" The 7 children looked at one another. Every instinct told them to answer, but no one moved. Because they had finally learned the most important lesson the Whisper King had taught them. Not every voice should be followed, and not every lonely voice belongs to a child. The voice faded into silence. No one answered, not because they lacked compassion, because they had learned. The forest spoke with many voices. Some belonged to memories, some belonged to echoes, some belonged to wishes that had never come true, and some were far older. The crack beneath the great cedar slowly widened, not enough for someone to fall inside, just enough for a warm breath to rise from below. It smelled of cedar, rain, fresh earth, and something else, spring, not the season, the feeling, the smell of a world beginning for the very first time. Miss Eleanor knelt beside the opening. She reached toward the darkness. Alden gently caught her wrist. No. She looked up. Why? The Whisper King's amber eyes reflected the golden glow of the great cedar. Because beneath those roots, time grows differently. Thomas frowned. What does that mean? Benjamin answered. It isn't beneath the forest, it's beneath. He searched for the right words. The first memory. No one understood. Naomi quietly raised her camera. Click. The screen remained dark. Then, for the first time since receiving it, the camera simply displayed one sentence: "No memory exists before this place." Capel whispered, "So, this is where remembering began." The great cedar pulsed again. Its golden veins spread through every root. The entire forest glowed. Every cedar, every fern, every blade of grass. For one impossible moment, the children could see thousands of glowing threads running through the earth, each thread connected to another place, north, south, across rivers, beneath mountains, beyond oceans. Miss Eleanor gasped. The other relics, Alden nodded. They've always been connected. The children watched in awe. One thread stretched toward Cliff Harbor, another toward Northgale Estate. 11 more disappeared into places none of them recognized. 13. Exactly 13. The same number as the Raven Keys, the same number marked beneath Bell Reef. Isaiah whispered, "We're looking at the whole network." Benjamin smiled sadly. The garden. Maya carefully opened the leather journal again. This time, words appeared immediately, not slowly, not magically, as though someone had been waiting for her. If you have found the route, then you have already become something more than explorers. Another line appeared. A keeper protects a place. A gardener protects every place. The children exchanged confused looks. Capel frowned. What's the difference? Alden answered without taking his eyes off the great cedar. A keeper stands watch. A gardener plants hope. Silence. Benjamin slowly walked to the tree. He rested his hand upon the bark. I failed. No one spoke. I loved this camp. I loved these children. I couldn't bear losing them. His voice trembled for the first time. So I chose memory instead of life. The great cedar responded, not with anger. Its branches lowered gently, almost forgiving him. One glowing cedar leaf drifted downward. Benjamin caught it. The moment it touched his palm, he remembered. His face changed. The smile disappeared. His knees buckled. Tears streamed down his face. I remember, he whispered. I promised them one summer. I never promised forever. The camp around them flickered. Children playing baseball froze. Campfires dimmed. Cabins shimmered. The beautiful illusion was weakening, not because someone was destroying it, because Benjamin had finally remembered the truth. The Lost Scout stepped from the trees. Daniel Ashcroft smiled for the first time. A genuine smile. Not frightened. Not sad. Peaceful. He walked to Benjamin, took the old camp director's hand. You kept your promise." Benjamin looked down at him. "No." Daniel gently squeezed his hand. "You gave us the happiest summer we ever had." A tear rolled down Daniel's cheek. "But it's time to go home." All around Camp Blackwood, children began appearing. Dozens, then hundreds. Not frightening, not ghostly, simply children, every camper who had ever vanished. Some from the 1920s, some from the 1940s, some from the 1950s. They quietly gathered around the great cedar, waiting, not for the children, for Benjamin. The camp director looked at Alden, his oldest friend. "I've made you carry my mistake for 100 years." Alden smiled through tears. "You never left me alone." Benjamin laughed softly. "No, I suppose I didn't." Then the ground shook, not violently, purposefully. The second heartbeat returned. Thump. This time the great cedar answered. Thump. Then another. The two heartbeats slowly synchronized. One, then the other, like two old friends speaking. The journal suddenly turned its own pages, stopping near the center. Golden ink raced across the paper. The first promise. Every garden begins with hope. Every keeper begins with duty. But every raven key chooses only those who protect others before themselves. The 7 tiny ravens that had entered the children's hearts earlier suddenly glowed beneath their jackets. Each child placed a hand against their chest. They could feel them, not beating, listening. A warm wind swept through Camp Blackwood. The whispers changed. For the first time, they were no longer warnings. They became gratitude. Thousands of voices, children, counselors, families, all speaking together. One sentence: "Thank you for remembering us." Then the great cedar split open a little farther. The emerald sapling inside stretched toward the sky. One tiny new branch unfurled. Upon it, a single black feather appeared, not growing, resting there, perfect, ancient, impossible. Miss Eleanor's breath caught. A raven. Alden slowly shook his head. His eyes never left the feather. No, something older. The feather slowly drifted from the branch. Instead of falling, it floated northward, toward the mountains beyond Camp Blackwood, toward one of the 11 unlit relic locations. The discovery arc was not ending. It was pointing them toward the next mystery. The black feather drifted into the night. No one tried to catch it. It floated above the great cedar, above Camp Blackwood, above the 7 children, then disappeared into the northern sky. For several moments, the forest became perfectly still. No whispers, no laughter, no bells, only the gentle heartbeat of the great cedar. Benjamin Hawthorne slowly removed the silver whistle from around his neck. He stared at it for a long time. "I've blown this whistle every morning for 114 summers." He smiled sadly. "I think it's time someone finally got to sleep in." The 7 children laughed. Even Alden smiled. Benjamin walked to the base of the great cedar. He gently hung the whistle on one of its lowest branches. The moment it touched the bark, the whistle became wood. It slowly merged into the tree. Another memory returned home. The old camp director turned toward the hundreds of children gathered throughout the camp. Some stood beside canoes. Others held fishing poles. A few still wore baseball gloves. Every child was watching him, waiting. Benjamin swallowed hard. For the first time in over a century, he gave them the one announcement he'd never been able to make. His voice trembled. "Campers." A long pause. Then he smiled. A real smile. Not one hiding fear, not one trying to preserve yesterday, just a man finally keeping the promise he should have made long ago. Camp Blackwood. He looked around one final time. Is officially closed. Silence. No one cried, no one protested. Instead, one little girl began clapping, then another child. Soon hundreds of children applauded. Not because camp was ending, because they were finally allowed to go home. The camp slowly began changing. Cabins faded gently into sunlight. The baseball field became a meadow. The The mess hall dissolved into wildflowers. The dock settled peacefully beneath the lake. Every building returned to the forest that had patiently protected it. Nature wasn't destroying Camp Blackwood, it was embracing it. One by one, the children began walking toward the great cedar. As each child reached it, they touched its bark, smiled, then quietly disappeared, not into darkness, into light. Their memories remained. Their spirits continued their journey. Daniel Ashcroft, the lost scout, was among the last. He stopped in front of Kid's Corner, especially Capel. You listened. Capel smiled. You saved us. Daniel shook his head. No, he looked toward Alden. He did. Then toward Benjamin, and so did he. Daniel reached into his pocket. He removed a small brass compass, simple, old. The glass was cracked. I carried this the day I got lost. He handed it to Capel. Nobody needs it anymore. Capel accepted it carefully. The compass needle spun once, then settled, not north, toward home. Daniel smiled. I always wondered where that was. He turned, touched the great cedar, and vanished. Only 3 figures remained beneath the tree: Benjamin, Alden, and the 7 members of Kid's Corner. Benjamin looked at his oldest friend. I'm sorry. Alden smiled. You already said that. Benjamin chuckled. I know, I just wanted to say it while I could still remember. The 2 old friends embraced. More than a century of regret disappeared in a single hug. When they stepped apart, Benjamin was younger. Not physically, but somehow lighter. The burden was gone. The great cedar pulsed once. Its golden bark opened. The emerald sapling inside had grown taller. Its leaves shimmered. Then one leaf drifted toward Alden, another toward Benjamin. They caught them. The leaves dissolved into warm light. Benjamin looked at his hands. They've forgiven us. Alden smiled. No, the forest reminded us we were never beyond forgiveness. The whispers returned one final time, not thousands, just 7, 1 for each child. Soft, gentle, personal. No one else heard them. Capel heard, always choose tomorrow. Maya heard, lead with courage. Naomi heard, remember everything. Isaiah heard, protect the forgotten. Priya heard, listen before speaking. Ethan heard, fear is not failure. Soren heard, home is never lost. The great cedar glowed brilliantly. The golden light spread across the entire forest. Every cedar tree answered. The heartbeat slowly faded, not because it had stopped, because it no longer needed to be heard. The forest had found peace. As dawn broke over the mountains, the 7 friends stepped back through the old camp gate. Thomas Mercer looked over his shoulder. The entrance sign still stood, weathered, beautiful. Beyond it, only wilderness, no cabins, no lake, no baseball field, just forest, exactly as every map had shown. Capel turned for one last look. The Whisper King still stood beneath the oldest cedar. He tipped his ranger's hat. For the first time, his coat no longer looked consumed by moss. The antlers had become young cedar branches. His amber eyes were brighter, more alive. He wasn't imprisoned anymore. He was simply the keeper, watching over a peaceful forest. As the children disappeared down the mountain trail, Alden looked toward the great cedar, then quietly smiled. They're ready. The forest whispered back, not in thousands of voices, just one, ancient, gentle, certain. No, they're only beginning. 3 days later, Camp Blackwood officially reopened. Newspapers celebrated. Television crews praised the restoration of the historic campground. Families hiked the trails. Children laughed beneath the towering cedars. The baseball field was gone. The cabins were gone. The lake had returned to nature. Only a handful of walking trails remained. Visitors called it peaceful, beautiful, quiet. No one remembered the impossible summer that had once lived there. And that was exactly as it should be. The oldest cedar still stood in the center of the forest, larger than ever. A simple wooden sign had been placed beside it, the founder's cedar. Please respect this protected tree. No one knew its true name, except 8 people, the 7 members of Kids Corner, and Alden Blackwood. Every Friday afternoon, life returned to normal, or at least as normal as life ever became on Cliff Island. The 7 friends gathered once again in their familiar corner booth inside Cliff BTC. Hot chocolate waited on the table. Thomas Mercer arrived carrying fresh blackberry pie from Jenny. Larry smiled as he walked past. Capel looked around the booth, then grinned. "I kind of missed this." "So did we," Maya replied. Miss Eleanor gently placed the cedar archive box in the center of the table. "It belongs to you." Capel carefully lifted the lid. Inside, 3 carefully labeled compartments now rested. Case number 1, the third stall mystery, a polished brass raven. Case number 2, the ghost ship of Cliff Harbor, Captain Victor's weathered ship's wheel. Capel gently opened the third compartment. Inside rested Daniel Ashcroft's compass. Its cracked glass had somehow become perfectly clear. The needle no longer spun. It always pointed toward home. Attached to it by a leather cord hung a tiny carved cedar raven, no larger than a thumbnail. Its wings were spread, ready for flight. A small brass plaque rested beneath it. Case number 3, the Whispering Woods Mystery. The forest remembers so others may move forward. No one spoke. They simply smiled. 3 mysteries, 3 lives restored, 3 places healed. Miss Eleanor unfolded the ancient map recovered beneath Bell Reef. The same parchment that had first revealed the 13 relic locations. When she laid it across the table, every child leaned closer. The map had changed. 3 circles now glowed with warm golden light. Northgale Estate, Bell Reef, Camp Blackwood. The remaining 10 locations remained dark, waiting. Thomas Mercer quietly traced the glowing points with one finger. 3 keepers. Alden's calm voice answered from behind them. 3 gardens restored. Everyone turned. The Whisper King stood in the doorway. For the first time, he looked almost ordinary. His ranger's uniform was clean. The moss had vanished. The antlers were gone. Only a small cedar leaf was embroidered above his heart. He smiled. "I wanted to thank you." Capel stood. "You don't have to stay in the forest anymore." Alden looked toward the mountains. "I choose to, there's a difference." Miss Eleanor smiled knowingly. "The best guardians always choose." Alden nodded. "They do." He reached into his pocket. Removing something wrapped in faded green cloth, he carefully unfolded it. Inside rested a single cedar cone, smaller than the others. Perfect. He placed it into Capel's hand. "It isn't a raven key. It never will be. It's simply a reminder." Capel turned it over. "What kind of reminder?" Alden smiled. "That every great forest begins with one seed." He tipped his ranger's hat, then quietly left. No dramatic farewell, no magic, just a good man walking home. That evening, the 7 friends climbed the lighthouse together. Thomas unlocked the old stone door beneath Bell Reef. The hidden chamber was exactly as they had left it. The circular floor, the map, the 13 carved ravens, the 3 glowing relic sites. Capel gently placed Daniel's compass into the 3rd stone pedestal. The moment it touched, the chamber came alive. The 3 glowing locations connected by lines of golden light. Northgale, Bell Reef, Camp Blackwood. The lines pulsed together. Then, without warning, a 4th location ignited. Not slowly, instantly, far to the northeast, high in the mountains. None of them recognized the symbol carved beside it. It wasn't a lighthouse, or a house, or a tree. It looked like a crown. The chamber trembled. Ancient gears hidden beneath the stone floor turned for the first time in centuries. A section of the wall slowly slid open. Behind it rested another map, older, Far older, not 13 locations, hundreds, across mountains, deserts, islands, forests, cities. The 7 children stared in stunned silence. Naomi finally whispered, "I thought there were 13. Miss Eleanor slowly shook her head. "There are 13 keepers." Thomas finished the thought, "but an entire world worth protecting." Tucked into the corner of the newly revealed map was a weathered envelope. Its wax seal bore a symbol none of them had ever seen, not a raven, a tree. Its roots spread across a circle resembling the world itself. Maya carefully broke the seal. Inside, only one sheet of parchment, only one sentence. Written in elegant black ink, "To the next generation of keepers, the garden is growing restless." Every glowing relic point on the map flickered once, then settled. Outside, a raven landed atop the lighthouse. It looked toward the mountains, spread its wings, and disappeared into the evening sky. Far beyond Cliff Island, where no map had yet carried them, a forgotten relic stirred. Not in anger, not in darkness, but because for the first time in generations, someone had answered its call. This episode, The Whispering Woods Mystery, is a gripping story of memory, loss, and courage from the Kids Corner Book 3 series. If you were captivated by this tale, please consider sharing it with a friend.